You have probably heard of the name Wesley, whether it's from the Methodist Church or from hymns that are written by the Wesley brothers. But this week we're going to look at an account of the life of John Wesley as we're finishing up our series on Foxe's Book of Martyrs. John Wesley was born on the 17th of June 1703 in Epworth Rectory, England, the 15th of 19 children of Charles and Susanna Wesley. The father of Wesley was a preacher, and Wesley's mother was a remarkable woman in wisdom and intelligence. She was a woman of deep piety and brought her little ones into close contact with the Bible stories, telling them from the tales about the nursery fireplace. She also used to dress her children in their best on the days when they were to have the privilege of learning their alphabet as an introduction to the reading of the Holy Scriptures. Young Wesley was a gay and manly youth, fond of games and particularly of dancing. At Oxford, he was a leader, and during the latter part of his course there, was one of the founders of the Holy Club, an organization of serious-minded students. His religious nature deepened through study and experience, but it was not until several years after he left the university and came under the influence of Luther's writings that he felt that he had entered into the full riches of the gospel. He and his brother Charles were sent by the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel to Georgia, in the United States, where both of them developed their powers as preachers. Upon their passage, they fell into the company of several Moravian brethren, members of the association recently renewed by the labors of Count Zinzendorf. It was noted by John Wesley in his diary that in a great tempest, when the English people on board lost all self-possession, these Germans impressed him by their composure and entire resignation to God. He also marked their humility under shameful treatment. It was on his return to England that he entered into those deeper experiences and developed those marvelous powers as a popular preacher, which made him a national leader. He was associated at this time also with George Whitefield, the tradition of whose marvelous eloquence has never died. What he accomplished borders upon the incredible. Upon entering his 85th year, he thanked God that he was still almost as vigorous as ever. He ascribed it, under God, to the fact that he had always slept soundly, had risen for 60 years at 4 o'clock in the morning, and for 50 years had preached every morning at 5. That's 5 a.m. Seldom in all his life did he feel any pain, care, or anxiety. He preached twice each day, and often thrice or 4 times. It has been estimated that he traveled every year 4,500 English miles, mostly upon horseback. The successes won by Methodist preaching had to be gained through a long series of years, and amid the most bitter persecutions. In nearly every part of England it was met at first by the mob with stonings and peltings, with attempts at wounding and slaying. Only at times was there any interference on the part of the civil power. The two Wesleys faced all these dangers with amazing courage and with a calmness equally astonishing. What was more irritating was the heaping up of slander and abuse by the writers of the day. These books are now all forgotten. Wesley had been in his youth a high churchman, and was always deeply devoted to the established communion. When he found it necessary to ordain preachers, the separation of his followers from the established body became inevitable. The name Methodist soon attached to them because of the particular organizing power of their leader and the ingenious methods that he applied. The Wesley Fellowship, which after his death grew into the great Methodist Church, was characterized by an almost military perfection of organization. The entire management of his ever-growing denomination rested upon Wesley himself. The annual conference, established in 1744, acquired a governing power only after the death of Wesley. Charles Wesley rendered the society a service incalculable, great by his hymns. Charles Wesley rendered the society a service incalculably great by his hymns. They introduced a new era in the hymnology of the English Church. John Wesley appropriated his days to his work in leading the church, to studying, for he was an incessant reader, to traveling, and to preaching. Wesley was untiring in his efforts to disseminate useful knowledge throughout his denomination. He planned for the mental culture of his traveling preachers and local exhorters, and for schools of instruction for the future teachers of the church. He himself prepared books for popular use upon universal history, church history, and natural history. In this, Wesley was an apostle of the modern union of mental culture with Christian living. He published also the best matured of his sermons and various theological works. These, both by their depth and their penetration of thought, and by their purity and precision of style, excite our admiration. Persistent, laborious love for men's souls, steadfastness, and tranquility of spirit were his most prominent traits of character. Even in doctrinal controversies, he exhibited the greatest calmness. He was kind and very liberal. His industry has been named already. In the last 52 years of his life, it is estimated that he preached more than 40,000 sermons. Wesley brought sinners to repentance throughout 3 kingdoms and over 2 hemispheres. He was the bishop of such a diocese as neither the Eastern nor the Western Church ever witnessed before. What is there in the circle of Christian effort foreign missions, home missions, Christian tracts and literature, field preaching, circuit preaching, Bible readings, or aught else which was not attempted by John Wesley, which was not grasped by his mighty mind through the aid of his divine leader? To him it was granted to arouse the English Church when it had lost sight of Christ the Redeemer to a renewed Christian life. By preaching the justifying and renewing of the soul through belief upon Christ, he lifted many thousands of the humbler classes of the English people from their exceeding ignorance and evil habits, and made them earnest, faithful Christians. His untiring efforts made itself felt not in England alone, but in America and in continental Europe. Not only the germs of almost all the existing zeal in England on behalf of Christian truth and life are due to Methodism, but the activity stirred up in other portions of Protestant Europe we must trace, indirectly at least, to Wesley. He died after a long life of tireless labor and unselfish service. His fervent spirit and hearty brotherhood still survives in the body that cherishes his name. Now, this version of Foxe's Book of Martyrs is copyright 1926. So, Methodism has changed quite a bit from the time of John and Charles Wesley to today. So this is not meant to praise Methodism. Perhaps what John Wesley started at the beginning was good and useful. Definitely Charles Wesley's music is stuff that are songs that we still enjoy today. But over time, things change, things shift. People don't have the same heart, the same mind that John Wesley had, and different directions are made over time. So this is just not a praise of the Methodist Church of today, of what the work that John Wesley did back in the 1700s. I'll have to read more about that here in the future. I'll try to find a biography on John Wesley, and perhaps we'll try to read through that here in the coming months, or perhaps next year. We'll see. The schedule's pretty well set at the moment. We'll see what happens. But John Wesley, he made efforts to share the gospel in various ways. There was talk of using many methods to share the gospel: circuit riding, doing open-air meetings, foreign missions. He was involved in a lot of things to help propagate the gospel, to share the gospel with others, and that we can definitely get behind and say that was a good thing that he did. Now, speaking of missions, our last episode that we're going to do here on the channel, this version of Foxe's Book of Martyrs. As I was reading, I realized that there's several different versions of Foxe's Book of Martyrs, and so each of them are a little bit different, how they're laid out, what the context is of some of them. The focus a little bit different. But this final chapter for this version is on the beginnings of the American foreign missions, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're not going to read the chapter, it's lengthy, but we're going to talk about some of the people mentioned in that in our closing episode here for Foxe's Book of Martyrs. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. If you've been finding this series interesting, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe. We're getting ever so close to that 1,000 subscriber mark, and we would love to meet that here in the next few months, and you can help us out by doing that. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe, or share it with a friend and tell them that they need to subscribe to listen and to help us reach 1,000 would be fantastic. And we'll be back next week with the beginnings of American foreign missions.